Hello everybody and welcome to Flock Talk. On my last order of bird pellets, I decided to go ahead and order in a sprout mix that I've never tried before. So we're going to go ahead and have the birds sample that today and see how it goes. This is the Microgreen sprout mix by Prairie. I have done a lot of sprouted seeds in the past, but usually I just buy seeds from like the bulk department at the grocery store and then I sprout them that way. This is actually the first time I'm buying a bird-specific sprouting seed, and I wanted to see if it was worth the hype. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to try it out and see if it's worth it. Sprouting seeds are really good for birds, especially if you have a bird that is a little bit pickier about the foods that they eat. Sprouting seeds are a really easy way to provide better nutrition for your bird while you're trying to convert them onto a better diet. Since a bird is most likely going to willingly eat a seed, when you then soak it in water and start to grow it a little bit, it changes the nutritional value of that seed and makes it a little bit healthier for them, as well as gradually adjusting the bird to the flavor of vegetables and pellets and things like that. So it's a really nice transitional food to use and is also a primary part of a wild parrot's diet. Since if they are eating seeds in the wild, they're not eating really dry ones. They're usually finding ones on the ground that are already slightly sprouted. How you make these seeds is really simple, and the instructions are right on the front of the package, super easy to follow. You do not need any fancy sprouting equipment to do it. You absolutely can buy sprouters and it will make the process a little bit easier to maintain, especially if you're making these in really large quantities. But for me today, I'm just going to be using a plain little glass jar. I'm choosing to use glass because you want it to be something that's not super porous, because we are going to be soaking these seeds in water and this dish is going to be remaining quite humid. You want to make sure that it's not going to be prone to developing bacteria, so you don't want to be using something that's plastic and particularly porous where that could become an issue. So I've got my glass jar here. I'm just going to sprinkle out the bottom layer of it with some seeds. You can add as much or as little as you want. It's not really going to affect all too much. I'm trying to make enough to last about a week for my birds, and then I'll start a new batch near the end of the week. Once we have our supplies, we're going to go ahead and get started. And the first step here is to soak the seeds for 8 hours. I personally like to make sure to rinse my seeds off before the soaking, just because there's usually a lot of dust on the outside of the shells. So I personally just like swishing them around in the water a little bit, rinsing them off, and making sure that the seeds are nice and clean before soaking them, where I'm just going to then fill up the dish with a bunch of water and leave it overnight. What this is doing is allowing the seeds to soak up that liquid so that way they will be able to grow, similar to if they were to have fallen on some wet dirt and then it rained a bunch and now they're sitting on wet ground, which is going to allow that seed to begin to germinate and begin to sprout. After this 8-hour period, you're not going to notice much of a difference. The seeds might seem a little bit more plump because they will now have soaked up a bunch of liquid, but you really shouldn't see much else other than that. This next stage is going to be the repeated rinsing. Or what we're going to do is drain the seeds out, and I'm going to swish them around in the water and rinse over and over again until I'm not feeling a film on the seeds anymore. Because these are soaking in water and remaining humid, it's very likely that you're going to develop mildew or potentially mold if you don't make sure that you are rinsing your seeds super thoroughly. And for this pack, it does say every 12 hours, but what I will say is through the years sprouting seeds, it does really dramatically vary based on where you live. If you live in a really humid area, every 12 hours will probably be fine because there's enough moisture in your air. But if you live somewhere that's a little drier, the seeds will dry out quicker. So you might find that you need to rinse them every 8 hours instead. All I would do is simply check on the seeds every 4 hours or so if you can, and if they look like they're getting dry, give them another rinse. You don't have to do it exactly every 12 hours. You just want to make sure that the environment in that container is staying moist so that way the seeds can properly grow and they're not going to dry out. To help with this, I'm going to be having the lid on top of my container, not pressed on all the way because you don't want to inhibit airflow, but you do want it just lightly covering the top so that way most of the moisture doesn't evaporate over the day and dry out the seeds. And that's honestly the bulk of the process. All you're going to do is repeat rinsing these seeds and making sure that they're staying hydrated until you're happy with how much growth has been done. Now this seed mix, I will say I was readily impressed with. As I said in the beginning, I usually get my seeds from just like the grocery store in the bulk department and I'll sprout them that way, and it does work. But because they're not necessarily sprouting specific seeds, they aren't guaranteed to be super healthy, fresh seeds. So when you sprout them, either they're going to take a really long time to grow, usually they take about a week for me, or some of them just won't grow at all because the seeds are essentially dead at that point. But with this mix, they were all really, really fresh. Every single seed in here started sprouting within that first 24-hour period, and they were ready to be eaten basically by the next day. I did wait all the way for the next 2 days, so 48 hours of rinsing, and they were ready to go. They were definitely extremely quick, and I really, really love that, because when something takes 5 days to sprout and it's unpredictable, it makes it really difficult to keep it in your regular rotation for your bird's diet. So by this only taking 2 days and having a really good consistent sprout after that 2 days, it makes it so that way if I do run out, it's 2 days. It's not the end of the world if they don't have sprouts for 2 days, and it's easy for me to just whip up another batch super, super quickly and not going, oh great, I'll have to wait a week, oh no, like this sucks. It just makes it a super streamlined experience, so I was really, really happy with how fast that they grew. With that, I will say that this mix did have a bunch of seeds that I'm not familiar with sprouting, so I'm not sure if they just didn't sprout for me, if I needed to wait longer, or if this is just a seed that straight up doesn't sprout in this form and it's more just going to soak and be a soaked seed instead. But I did find that the rice and the smaller tiny seeds in this mix just never really sprouted for me. And again, whether that's user error or a principle of this mixture maybe being made out of things that have wildly different sprouting times, I'm not too sure. It wasn't too big of an issue for me, and it does kind of, again, help with that diet conversion, where if there are seeds that aren't fully sprouted in the mix and you have a picky bird, they might eat the ones that aren't sprouted, and that will gradually expose them to the ones around it that are sprouted. So it's not necessarily the end of the world, it's just kind of mildly inconvenient, I guess, where you kind of would like everything to be sprouted at the same time, but that is incredibly difficult to guarantee. Now, this mix does have a massive variety of seeds in it, which I really do quite like, because the more variety you can offer your bird is usually the better option. And when you are buying seed mixes that are intended for human consumption, or you are making your own, it can be really difficult to get a lot of different seeds in there, and you'll usually just have like 4 or 5 different types. In this bag, there are 19 different seeds, so that's quite a bit of variety and a pretty good chance that your bird is going to like at least one thing in there, and it'll gradually expose them to all the others. So I really appreciate the massive amount of variety that is offered inside of this bag, which also includes size difference and texture and flavor differences among all those different seeds, which are going to make it so much nicer for my birds to enjoy, as well as create a good varied diet. So about 50% of the seeds in this bag, my birds have never had before. So I was really interested to see if they would just gobble it down or if they'd be a little bit more hesitant. Mr. Toto, my Quaker, absolutely gobbled it down super quick, had no hesitation. As soon as he saw there was food in a dish, he was happy to eat it. Now I will say that's not necessarily a fair review, because Toto does do that with basically everything. He is an absolute food mongrel. I have never really had an issue with him not wanting to eat something. So the fact that Mr. Tubby Tustard over here does absolutely scarf it down doesn't necessarily mean that every other bird will. So take his opinion with a grain of salt, because he's a garburator with wings. Newt, on the other hand, is not necessarily a picky eater, but is basically your standard parrot where it takes a little bit of time to warm up to things. And despite the fact that he has had sprouts in the past, and he has had about half of the seeds that are in this mix already, he was a little worried about it. A lot of the seeds that are in here that are bigger are ones that he's never seen before, so he was a little bit nervous about it, and it took him quite a bit to actually warm up to the dish. Once he did, and he realized, oh, it's just sprouts, he then started gobbling it down and quite enjoyed it. He stuck more so with the smaller seeds, though, which I did find interesting, because usually he's a big enjoyer of lentil sprouts. But in this mix, he mostly went for the millets, the quinoa, and the rice bits first. I don't think I got a video clip of it, but he did eventually start eating some of the other ones as I mixed it in with his vegetables throughout the week, so he did gradually warm up to the other flavors. So that, I would say, is a better demonstration of the fact that the bird was uncomfortable with the food at first. He saw some things in there that he recognized, decided it was maybe worthwhile to try eating it, and then gradually warmed up to the other flavors. So it did work quite well as a dietary conversion and helping to encourage your bird try new things. So I will definitely give it some bonus points for that. And I think that'll do it from me here today. I really did enjoy making these. It was a super quick process. Rinsing them out was super easy. They didn't get super mildewy, which I've had with certain seeds in the past. They were easy to maintain. They grew super quickly, which makes it really easy for me to fit into their routine regularly. And both of my birds did end up enjoying it with a normal amount of time to have them adjust to something and decide how they feel about it. I'm really happy with it, and it's definitely going to be a more consistent part of their daily diet. As far as pricing goes, this was $19.95 off the Feathered Addictions website in Canadian dollars, not American dollars, Canadian dollars. So I would say that is a pretty reasonable price as far as Canadian currency goes at the moment. For 6 months worth of food that is dried and able to stay in my pantry and then be served fresh and wholesome for them every day, I would certainly say it's worth it for the quantity that is in here. With me only using a tablespoon across 2 weeks of food for them, this could easily last them 6 months, maybe even longer. So I don't personally see a problem with that price. And I do personally think that it's probably worth it. So that will do it from me here today. My birds absolutely loved this mix. If you have had other products from this company before, let me know. This is my first time trying them and my guys loved it. I would love to know what your guys' opinions are as well. But that'll do it for me here today. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye!